Okay, so we have a new episode of Legends and Leaders, and today it's great to have Dan here. Dan, you're somebody that's been super innovative with the internet in many different areas for quite some time. I mean, you spearheaded the Google Books project. I think they were doing like a million books scanned, like a year. I mean, it was a lot of books, and you helped really make that easy for people to understand and the information there democratized. You were leading up engineering at NASA pretty early on, involved with AI and robotics, much before what it's become today. And now you're the CEO of Twitch, and you're leading the creator-focused streaming platform, and trying to be really innovative with helping creators actually earn proper living off it, while also bringing technologies in that area with live streaming to the forefront. So excited to have you here and to get into your story.
Thanks, Ben. Excited to be here. So let's jump into it.
Awesome. So Dan, initially, how did your passion for technology begin? What kind of got you interested in tech?
It's interesting. I always kind of said I'm a accidental technologist because when I went to college, I was planning on majoring in theater and math, and I've always been good with math. And I took my first computer science class, and this was quite some time ago. This was 1981, so most of y'all weren't alive. And there weren't that many computer science classes. And in fact, my first one, we programmed with cards, just to show how old I am. But I did well in the class, and it was easy. I used to joke that the teacher used to tease me because I'd fall asleep in most of the classes, and I still got a good grade. So I said, wow, this computer thing is easy, and I do well, and maybe I should major in computers, And I was kind of a liberal arts student in general. I took political science, I took, philosophy, I took all sorts of things, and really just took the bare minimum at Duke required for computers. And then I graduated, and I was thinking, what am I going to do with my life? And thought about doing theater. I decided I didn't want to do that. And so I got a job using my technical background and did that for 4 years. And then I said, well, I don't understand computers as much as I'd like because I didn't really focus on it at Duke. And I went to Duke undergrad. And so I went back and got my PhD, but it was never like this grand vision. I often joke that all my friends, when I graduated, pretty much back then, the idea of going into technology to make money, nobody thought of that. You all went to be a doctor or a lawyer, or you went and got your MBA. So that's what all my friends eventually went to grad school. One of them. And I grew up in a very progressive household, that my families were very conscious on social justice. And this idea of just going to do something because you're going to make money just seemed like shallow. And I thought getting my PhD in computer science was in some ways more pure and more, and it turned out to be a very good way to make money. So I just kind of happened upon it. And I often say I'm really more of a problem solver that happened to get trained in technology. And what I like are problems of all shapes and sizes.
Interesting. So, like you mentioned, you kind of had this background in computer science. So you wound up working for NASA, and you were there for, a bit of time. What interests you? Why were you so drawn to robotics, and what did you see in AI then that's now kind of become much more mainstream? What were some of those developments there?
Well, the big thing, AI, I decided to major in AI when it was still fairly young. And in fact, when I came out of my PhD, that was the period often referred to as the AI winter, because AI actually went through a early hype cycle in the 80s and 90s. But by the late 90s, everyone was like, oh, it's not going to work. And, it kind of lost its sexiness. But it's interesting. I often think we make this big deal about AI and these grand visions, but really AI is just interesting algorithms to solve interesting problems. And I found there are just a lot of interesting problems that AI would be used to solve. And so that's what drew me to it. I went to NASA because I didn't want to go to academia. NASA did good research and they had good problems. That one of the biggest challenges in any field when you're trying to do novel work is you need to have interesting problems to motivate your work, to make sure that your research actually makes a difference in something in the real world. And at the time, there weren't a lot of applications of AI in, the commercial world. That just wasn't where it was being used. And NASA had a plethora of applications for AI. So it was a great place to go and apply some of the technology and learn about the technology and learn about, how it can be used to solve problems.
So they had the right kind of problems to focus on interesting, challenging ones.
Yes, and this actually is a side comment about research and academia that I think has evolved since in the modern tech space. Is the idea of when you're doing research is you're trying to take a specific problem and abstract it to a general problem. And then when you solve that general problem, then the idea is the solution to the general problem can be applied in many different places. But what often happens in research is people just stay in that abstraction space and they solve problems that may not actually map to a real problem that anyone cares about. And I always remember this one time when I was at NASA and this researcher described this thing they wanted to do that where they could write a paper. And they said, Dan, if you could just find me a NASA problem, then, and they gave me this very constrained problem they needed to demonstrate the technical work they wanted to do. And I said, well, that's kind of the hard part, because the reality was there wasn't a good problem for the stuff they wanted to do, but they were basically a solution looking for a problem. And NASA had a lot of real problems. And that's one problem that technologists often fall into is they have a solution and they look to find an application of their solution as opposed to starting from a problem and saying, all right, I'm going to solve this problem.
So you spent some time at NASA. I think after that, you decided to go to Google. Why did you feel like, Danny, was the right time to go to Google? And why did you want to be involved in Google Book Search? Like, what was so interesting about that problem?
So when I went to Google, interestingly, I think I probably, certainly financially, I left late. I went in 2005. I think they went public in 2004. The person I'd worked for at NASA, Peter Norvig, who's well known in AI, he left like in 2002 or something like that. And so, the Google thing and the internet thing was kind of happening. I was living in Silicon Valley. I really enjoyed NASA, but I was not. This person grew up dreaming of NASA, right? I was a computer scientist working in a space agency. And in the end, most of the people that, are like NASA lifers are people that are astrophysicists or, aerospace engineers, because it's the only place they can do the stuff they like. And so I realized, look, I've really enjoyed NASA, but at some point I want to do something different. Looked around, Google, I was pretty clear that Google was a good fit for me. In fact, I had to be patient because I was talking at the time Yahoo was around and Microsoft and some startups, and I talked to them and I had a few jobs, and Google was still sort of mulling over whether or not to give me an offer, because Google was just very noted for being slow and we're Google, we can do whatever we want. But I was like holding out because I just felt like Google was the right place. And it ended up being a great place to go, and it was a good move. And book search was just like, basically Google back then would hire you and then they'd figure out where you would work. They didn't have, so they gave me an offer and then they said, oh, why don't you go work on book search? And book search was a good application because the problem was one that involved humans and machines and AI, because we're building this scanning technology. It ended up being really fun. Something I really enjoyed, something that I still think made a difference. Didn't have the impact that Larry and Sergey initially hoped it would. But and then I just learned a lot about the publishing world and the library world and the academic world. So it ended up being a really good fit.
So I think one of the other things you did was you worked on YouTube and you were leading engineering and product development there. Do you think how do you think that experience kind of shaped what you're doing now at Twitch? Like, was that really beneficial for leading Twitch?
Absolutely. I mean, in some ways, YouTube was at a similar scale when I was there as Twitch is now. We might be a little more mature than YouTube was back then. But an interesting story was a lot of folks don't know this, but actually YouTube almost acquired Justin TV before Twitch even came into existence.
Really?
And in fact, if we had acquired them, then Twitch never would have happened. That in fact, we were starting YouTube Live and we had a team doing it. And Justin TV at the time had some initial traction, but wasn't really like going to the next level. And so we had an agreement to acquire them at a particular price. And this was I was running it, but it was kind of a small acquisition. I wasn't heavily involved. It was someone below me. And we did the interviews and everyone thought, oh, this happened at Google a lot. They were very kind of egocentric about how good their engineers were. And they're like, oh, I don't know if like they're as good as we are. And so they tried to lower the price of what had been agreed upon because they weren't going to take as many of the engineers. And then Justin TV said no. And then shortly thereafter, Emmett spun off and started Twitch. But it was a pennies. It was a tiny amount compared to what eventually Twitch was acquired by Amazon. And so it really, like, I learned a lot about social media. I learned a lot about growing these platforms. So I think it helps a tremendous amount in terms of leading Twitch.
Sounds like it. So how did the opportunity for you to be involved with Twitch kind of begin, Dan? I think you started out focusing on like creator and community experiences. Like, why do you think that was such an important need for someone to be in a leadership role there?
Well, really, since part of this is just interesting stories, one of the interesting stories I often tell is, when Emmett first offered me the job, I turned it down. And I had left the previous company. I was taking some time off, spending some time with the family, and he offered me the job. And at the time, there was stuff going on with my son. I thought the timing wasn't great, but I also felt like, because I'm not a gamer, and I also felt like, well, I don't know if Twitch is the thing for me. I'm not a gamer, and at that point, I very much thought of Twitch as a gaming platform. I didn't really fully appreciate the community aspects of Twitch because I didn't use it a lot. And I said, no, I don't think I'm the right person. And then he came back like 4 months later and said, Dan, we've looked at a bunch of other people and we really think you're the right person. And at that time I was in a different position and I thought more. And, I said, all right, let me go do it. I liked all the people I interviewed with. And interestingly, it ended up being like this perfect place for me because I'd done a lot with community in the past. And as I said, as an undergrad, I was a theater major. And really, I was actually, which is one thing I do when I stream. I actually like the creative process. I like the kind of improvisational performance art, which is Twitch. And it's only after being there I realized how, while most of the streamers are gaming, really what it is a talk platform and a community platform where they happen to be gaming. And it's by watching the gaming that you build the emotional attachments. And so it really was sort of this kind of like, for those that believe in fate, something that was kind of pulling together these two sides of my personality, towards the end of my career. So it's really been a perfect fit.
So it's interesting kind of how your background came into full play here. Like, you had that theater background, you kind of went a different avenue with a bunch of the other different career paths you were in, and then circled back here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one thing I talk about a lot is, we always put people in boxes, and we put ourselves in boxes, and we say, oh, he's a tech guy, right? And so when I first came in, I came in to run product and engineering. This was your comment. And then after I was there for a while, I took over the content portion. And so I was eventually president, running most of the company, and then I became CEO. But the interesting thing is, people might say, oh, he's a tech guy, he's a product guy. He doesn't necessarily, get the creators. In fact, when I first was announced CEO, Jake and Bake has this kind of famous video clip where he was like, oh, I don't know if he really understands the creator. And part of it was he was just placing me in a box after meeting me for 5 minutes, right? And that's what we do as humans because it's easy. But the reality is we all have these different sides to who we are. We didn't come out of the womb as tech people or as content creators or whatever, right? And I always feel like this is one of the things that so often, not only do other people limit us, but we limit ourselves because we tell ourselves these stories about what we're not. I'm not this. I'm not that. And so often those things aren't true if you just challenge them.
Definitely agree. Dan, could you just like dive a bit more into like you mentioned you recruited, we talked about you recruited to kind of be there in the more focusing on like community and growing that, but then eventually you got the CEO role. Like, what were some qualities or what were some things that you did at the company that you think maybe stood out to Emmett and you got this CEO role?
Well, I think the reality was when I came in, it was Emmett, Sarah Clemens, and I that were kind of running the company. There were three of us. Sarah Clemens moved on. So then it was kind of Emmett and I. So it was sort of a natural transition. Okay. But I think the thing that makes it's not just, there's one thing about, getting the job. There's another thing about when the job's a really good fit. right? And so I don't think it was all that. It wasn't surprising to anyone when Emmett decided to move on that I'd be CEO because I was running much of the company. But I think it is a particularly good fit. I think one of my strengths is to be empathetic to people that are different, that don't have the same perspective as me. This is one thing I've had to do since getting there. Since I'm not a gamer, I would ask a lot of people questions about why they watch Twitch, how do they watch Twitch, all this stuff. And I slowly got to see Twitch through their eyes. And the reality is, I've often said not being a gamer was both a strength and a weakness. Obviously, it's a weakness because I wasn't using Twitch all the time. But it was also a strength because so often when you use a product a lot, you see the product through the portion of that product that you respond to, the thing that draws you to that product. And often that blinds you because the thing about Twitch is for whatever you think it is, it's so much more because there's so many streamers doing so many different and weird things and all that in fact, and the users come for many different reasons. So that if you really want to get Twitch, you can't have this one canonical view. And since I was not what I'll call the stereotypical Twitch user, I didn't view Twitch through the lens that user might. And I was always trying to understand how for different people it was different things. And I think that's been very helpful. And I think the streamers have responded to that because, I'm able to listen and learn from them.
Yeah, I think it's so important that you're like that. I mean, it's such a diverse and unique place, Twitch. There's so many different types of people there, and that you're willing to kind of understand what people are doing and be accepting of it is great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Dan, Amazon acquired Twitch. How is it dealing with Amazon? Like, how has Amazon been most beneficial in terms of helping you guys scale and helping Twitch really grow? Like you mentioned, it's a kind of like what YouTube was at when you were involved with YouTube. How have they been most beneficial to its growth?
I think the biggest thing is they give us a fair amount of space. I know a lot of people. It's always nice to characterize this meme of big bad Amazon and pure Twitch, but I really what Amazon has done is often provide us resources, and they've been really patient. People often focus on the cost of an acquisition, but a big part is allowing us to continue to invest, to continue to build out the property, to continue. And so they've been very patient in terms of investing in Twitch. They give us a fair amount of independence. And it is absolutely the case that part of, the obligation is, Twitch isn't a charity. So, I need to figure out how to run it so that it's, it makes money so it doesn't lose money. But Amazon is very patient, very believes in the bigger vision of Twitch. Andy Jassy, for much of the while that we were, before he became CEO, we reported to Andy Jassy, and he's a strong proponent of Twitch, believes in what we're doing. And so I think that has really given us resources to continue to scale and invest.
That's great. So, there's like with Twitch specifically, like you want to continue, of course, to grow revenue, but you also want to make creators happy. Like, how do you view balancing this relationship, and like, what do you think it will take to, really further increase the profitability of Twitch to the point where you can just have so many resources just to continue just keep scaling this at an abundant rate?
Well, the interesting thing is, the best way to make creators happy, help them make money. It turns out they actually really like making money, especially when they're funding their life through Twitch. And so the truth is, we are very much in this together. That in fact, in almost all cases, when our creators win, we win. When we win, our creators win. Right. A big part in the evolution is making sure we're being smart in how we spend money, and also realizing that we would like, it really helps us when we can keep money in creators' pockets, because that allows creators to continue doing what they're doing. So, we've been very intentional. There's always all sorts of discussion of revenue share split. And we've been very intentional about saying, look, for those people who are funding a portion of their lives through Twitch, we want them to be able to sustain that as a career. And so that's why we, have the programs like the Plus program to try and give them additional revenue share as they are making Twitch an important part of their lives. And then that allows them to do it to 5, 10, 15 years. And the important thing, and I've said this many times, Twitch is very unique. And it is not the case that if we weren't here, suddenly all these creators would just be doing it somewhere else. TikTok's a very different platform. YouTube's a very different platform. The community experience on Twitch is very unique. And so there's this obligation to ensure not just that we're prospering 5 years from now, but that we're here 20 years from now, 30 years from now, 50 years from now, because the creators that depend upon us, this idea that you create and then go off to do an adult job, that's just not actually the creator world, right? Co Carnage has been on Twitch, I don't know if it's 12, 13 years. He's got 2 or 3 kids. He'll be on Twitch for the next 20 years. And if so we need to be there because this is how he funds his life. And that's true of so many people on Twitch. And so I think the creators have, as long as the creators trust that we're trying to make decisions that in the long range are going to be good for them to ensure we're here, they appreciate that. So I think that's been a big thing about me being out there engaging with communities, because they trust that as we make difficult decisions, we aren't making them lightly or callously or cavalierly, but we're making them because we kind of want the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely important to view it like that. I think that there's a lot of like long-term focus, like you just mentioned, but there's also, you guys, of course, are investing in the technology and making sure the technology is the best. Like, where do you view streaming technology going? Like, what are some new developments in the space that you're most excited
about? Let's see. So certainly, I think one thing that will be interesting is generative AI. I think generative AI is going to give creators, it's basically going to help augment their creativity and give them more things to do as they make emotional connection with their creators. So I don't think they actually are a threat to what we do. I think, in fact, there's an augmentation to what we do. I think VTubing is actually quite interesting. Many VTubers, they're able to express themselves in their virtual character in ways that they don't in real life, or if they were on screen, because they're not comfortable with the camera on them or whatever, they're a virtual character. And I think the technology is getting it easier and easier, because it's been prohibitively expensive to be a VTuber. And now I think in 3 years, you'll be able to have full body motion tracking, and it'll be a heck of a lot cheaper. And so I think it opens up to a lot more people. So I think those are the 2 things that jump to mind off the top of my head.
Yeah, just the last question, like in general, like what are some of your like short-term and long-term goals now, like from a personal level as well as professional? Like, what do you hope to accomplish over the next 5 to 10 years?
Interesting. I mean, let's see. So from a personal and professional, so from a personal level, most of my energy is focused on Twitch. And then also, my life, the biggest thing. So I'm actually training for another Ironman now. I've done 2 before, and I have some streamers that are going to do a half Ironman for me in September, and then a full one in November. And so I'm enjoying getting out there, exercising, gives me something to focus on, and something to engage with creators on. In terms of Twitch, our big area of our investment is improving the mobile experience. I think that that's going to be an area where we still have a lot of work we can do to make it both easier to discover creators and also to get you to have shorter, more frequent sessions on Twitch. Another area I'm very excited about is making it easier and easier for streamers to share content on third-party social media. Ultimately, we're about the emotional connection that a streamer has with their community, and we need to think, how can that streamer maintain that emotional bond? One way they can do it is by getting people to have shorter sessions on Twitch, but another way is where you have artifacts from your stream that then get distributed liberally through third-party social media, because that keeps the creator top of mind. So I'm working a lot on the clips editor and how to get content out, because I think it'll benefit our creators. So those are a couple of the things that come to mind. The other that I'm very enthusiastic about is collaboration. ultimately, that is a great way to create content, and it's also a great way to grow on Twitch. We're launching some updates to stream together that make it easier for people to do impromptu collaboration, because I think that's one reason why gaming has been so successful, is because collaboration is a big part of it.
Mm-hmm. Well, those sound exciting, Dan. I appreciate you coming on, sharing your story, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing how Twitch continues to grow and this creator community is sustained, and there's so many more people that get to enjoy what the creator community is. So thanks for coming on.